Sech the Shabbos Parachof Mishnah Aleph. Rebelezer Omer Toilanes Ham Shameres B'Yontiv. In general, the malachas that are asur on Shabbos are asur on Yontif as well, with one exception. The Torah allows some malachas to be performed on Yontif for Oichel Nefesh, preparing food. The following Mishnah records a machlekes whether this exception is limited to activities directly involved in preparing food, such as shechting or cooking, or whether it extends even to activities that make food preparation possible, such as making a utensil in which to prepare food. The Mishnah discusses this in the context of hanging a strainer over a container, thereby making a temporary roof over it, which would normally be an act of boina, which would be asur on Shabbos. So Rebbe Lezer Omer Toilanes Ham Shameres B'Yontiv. Rebbe Lezer says you may hang a strainer over the mouth of a container on Yontiv. Although doing so midrabanan is considered boina, it's mutter because the malachas performed for Oichel Nefesh is mutter on Yontiv. Rebbe Lezer is matter even a malacha deraisa for the sake of making food preparation possible, but only when the activity could not have been done before Yom Tov. When it could have been done before Yom Tov, he's matter performing only a drabanan for the sake of making Oichel Nefesh. Hanging a strainer over a container involves just a drabanan of making a temporary tent. Therefore, even though the strainer could have been hung before Yom Tov, it's mutter to hang it on Yom Tov. V'noisen la tluya b'Shabbos, and on Shabbos a malacha is asur even for Oichel Nefesh, and a strainer may not be hung over the container. You may pour wine into the strainer that had already been hung before Shabbos. Although straining the wine separates the wine from the sediments, Rebbe Lezer does not forbid it under the laws of Bairer, since it's not the usual manner of doing Bairer. The malacha of Bairer is typically done to prepare the selected item for storage. The types of Bairer are done to prepare food for immediate use are therefore considered unusual. Straining wine in this fashion before a meal is such an activity and is therefore mutter. The Chachamim say, you may not hang a strainer over a container even in Yontif. Only malachas that are directly involved in preparing food are mutter in Yontif, not malachas related to making food preparation possible. Nor may we pour wine into hanging a strainer on Shabbos. You may pour wine into a hanging strainer on Yontif. Preparing wine by straining is an actual preparation of food and is going to be mutter on Yontif. Mishnah Beis. The previous Mishnah we learned, according to the Chachamim, it's also to strain wine containing sediment on Shabbos. By the way, just to ha'ara, obviously the shmuz that we're coming off over here is in the previous parak, Blessed Demila, is talking about what hachanos you're allowed to make for a bris milah on Shabbos. So obviously the actual bris is going to be something that's going to be like a Shabbos, as we spoke there. But Rebbe Lezer held over there that it was mutter to cut down trees to make pechamen, to heat up the water that you're going to use to bathe the baby from the bris on Shabbos. So that's something that's very vital. So we see even over here, this parak is discussing the Rebbe Lezer's heterim to allow Oichel Nefesh and Yontif. That it's not just the directly cooking and baking and putting things into the oven, but it's a lot more falls under the category of Oichel Nefesh. So nice and ma'am al gabe hashmar b'shul sheyitzal. On Shabbos we may pour water over wine sediments that were left in a strainer before Shabbos, so that the sediments are drained of any wine that's absorbed in them. As the water passes through the sediments, it extracts the wine from them, and the water-wine mixture then drains into the container below. This is not considered an act of bairer because the water that was poured in was clear and did not need any straining to begin with. Although some wine is also being extracted from the sediments, this too is not considered any bairer. The malacha of bairer involves separation of a mixture into distinct items. In this case, this didn't happen, for the wine was just extracted from the sediments and doesn't drain alone, but a minority ingredient of the water of which it is now a part that's together with it. So it's not complete bairer. And we may filter drinkable wine through cloths and through a basket made of palm twigs to eliminate the undesired whitish particles that collect in the wine. Since such wine can be drunk as is, filtering it is not also min Torah as bairer. However, since most people prefer to filter it, Rabbanu require that one do so with a shinoi by using a cloth or a basket rather than an actual strainer. However, wine that cannot be drunk unfiltered, such as wine that has sediments, may not be filtered even in an unusual fashion, according to the Chacham in the previous Mishnah. On the other hand, wine containing very few impurities, which most people drink unfiltered, may be filtered even through a regular strainer. Now we have another issue over here that we're going to get, that we have a problem of libun. With Tevea, it's generally also to wet fabrics on Shabbos that are concerned that you might wring them out, which would be schita. The Mishnah here speaks of a cloth that is designated for filtering wine. Since it's designated for this purpose, we are not concerned that one may wring out the wet cloth since he doesn't care if it remains wet. We may crack a raw egg into a mustard strainer in order to improve the appearance of the mustard seeds that are in the container below. Although the thinner yolk drains through the strainer and drips into the mustard below, while the thicker egg white remains above, cracking the egg into the strainer is not usher because of bayra. It was customary to add egg yolk to mustard seeds and to similar dark-colored foods in order to brighten them. What is that? You may make any amount of yenumlin, which is a mixture of wine, honey, and pepper. The Rav says yayin utvashu pilpulin on Shabbos. Though making this beverage involves a considerable amount of work and expertise, it's not considered excessive and professional toil that would generally be asur on Shabbos. It's only mutter to mix the ingredients together lightly. It's forbidden to stir the mixture excessively and to strain it, for that's considered excessive. It's a tircha, which would be forbidden on Shabbos. Hagam, tircha is not one of the lamtas malachas. Rabbi Yehuda says, b'Shabbos b'kais b'yamtav b'logan b'moed b'chavos. Rabbi Yehuda says that the excessive tircha and making a large amount of yenumlin on Shabbos, one may only make a size of 1 cup at a time. B'yamtav b'logan, on Yantiv, when restrictions involving food preparations are more lenient because you're allowed to do things for Echel Nefesh, one may even make it in a bottle, 1 bottle full at a time. B'moed b'chavos and Chalamoid, where may one do more malachas and more tircha than in Yantiv itself, one may even make it in a barrel, only 1 barrel full at a time. Reb Tzadik says that the amount one make is not dependent on whether it's Shabbos, Yantiv, or Chalamoid, but rather hakol fi ha'orchim. It depends on the number of guests one has. Even on Shabbos, one may make as much as necessary to satisfy the needs of his guest, even more than a barrel full. On a Chalamoid, one may not make more yenumlin than necessary, even if it's less than a barrel full. Meaning it's hakol fi ha'orchim. And it's interesting, the Rav points out, the halacha ketana kamish ha'esin yenumlin b'Shabbos, kefi mashahin reitzim, there's no problem. Meaning, according to Reb Tzadok, if you have 8 people, you're not allowed to make for 9 people, which is interesting because on Yantiv, with the heter to cook more than you need at that time is high, because maybe other people would come. I don't know if that would agree or disagree with what Reb Tzadok is saying over here. Mishnah Gimel, Ein shayrin es hachiltis bepaitrin. We may not soak chiltis. What's chiltis? A type of sharp herb that in English they title it as asafetida. A-S-A-F-E-T-I-D-A. I don't even know if I pronounced that correctly. In warm water, you're not allowed to soak in warm water to make a liquid that's typically drunk as medicine. Since preparing medicine often involves grinding herbs, which is asur, preparing any medicine, even if it does not involve grinding, is considered uvda dechoil and is therefore asur midrabbanan. Meaning, even if a person were to drink this chiltis drink, just to drink it, even not for medicinal purposes, he's not allowed to, because once there's a xero of not doing any type of medicine for grinding, so then he's not allowed to do this either. One may put chiltis into vinegar to make a liquid that's typically used as a food dip. One may put the chiltis in vinegar even if he wishes to use it as medicine, because it looks like he's simply preparing a dip. The ein sharin es hakarshinim, he may not soak veggies in water so that any waste mixed with the veggies flows to the top. Nor may we rub with our hands in order to remove any waste stuck to them. That's also going to be considered bayrer. But one may put the karshinim mixed with waste into a sieve, into a basket to store them, even though the waste may fall through the holes or the sieve in the basket, since this is not his intention. You may not sift straw with a sieve in order to separate it from the bristles that surround the wheat kernels, which are not fit for animal consumption. Nor may one put the sieve with the straw in it on an elevated area, so that there's space between the sieve and the ground, in order that the bristles should drop through the holes through the sieve. This too would also be asur midrabbanan al tzbeirer. However, one may take straw in a sieve and place it in a feeding trough, even though some bristles will likely fall through the sieve while he carries it, because his intention is not to separate the bristles, but only to transport the straw. This would also be going according to Reb Shimon, that davar she'eino miskaven is mutter, but if you hold davar she'eino miskaven is asur, then this malacha of bayra would be asur. Mishnah Dalet. Garfin Milfnei Hapatam. The Mishnah continues the previous discussion of feeding animals on Shabbos. Yeah. So the previous Mishnah we discussed about Sherenes Achiltis, Sherenes Hakarchinim was for animals. Sherenes Hakarchinim, V'leishafet, V'leisen Sechel Kwel Sechel Kalkal, till the end of the Mishnah, was halachas regarding animal food. So regarding animal food on Shabbos, beginning with halacha by sweeping an animal's feeding trough. It's also to sweep midrabanan, midrabanan it's also to sweep an earthen floor because of mashva gumais, which is the malacha of building. One wants to fill up the holes that the animal's food will not get caught in them. So the first halacha in our Mishnah discusses sweeping the floor of a trough that's water stone with its own floor. So garfin malafnei apatam masalkan letstadin mipnei harei. You may sweep dirt out from a trough that's placed before an ox that's being fattened for slaughter, provided that the trough is contained with a non-earthen floor, so there's no concern for any holes being filled. The dirt is swept out so it doesn't get mixed in with the animal's food, which could cause the animals to reject the food. And if there's a lot of straw in front of the ox, we may move the straw to the sides and account the dung. That is so that the ox will not step on it and dirty it with the dung on its feet, which would again cause the animals to reject the food. The Chachamim say both sweeping the trough and moving the straw is aser. They aser sweeping the trough because they're concerned that people might mistakenly think that it's also mutter to sweep a trough with an earthen bottom. They aser moving the straw because some of it's surely already dirty and the animal will never eat it. Since part of that straw is never used, has no use, it's muksa, and it's going to be aser to move any of the straw. You may take excess food from one animal and place it before another animal on Shabbos, provided that the second animal will likely eat the food. One may not, however, bring leftovers to another animal that will probably reject the food in the hope that the animal will decide to eat it, because we assume that the second animal will not eat it. Bringing the food to the animal is therefore considered unnecessarily exerting oneself on Shabbos, which is aser. Thus, one may not take leftovers from an ox which drools on his food and bring it to a donkey, because the donkey is disgusted by the saliva and will likely reject it. Mishneh Hey. Hakash al gabe amita. Although straw is usually muksa because its standard is used to fuel a fire, the Mishnah mentions cases in which removing straw is mutter. Hakash al gabe amita, if straw is on the bed, one wishes to fluff it up and make it softer to lie on. He should not move it with his hands because it's muksa. He may move it with his body. For example, when he's lying down, he may shift it with his shoulders because this is an unusual way of moving the straw. If the straw was set aside before Shabbos as animal food, or if there was a pillow or sheet on it when Shabbos began, indicating that it was going to be used as a mattress, one may move it even with his hand. Since the straw is designated for a permissible use, it's not muktzah. The next case of the Mishnah, the next discussion is about a clothes press that consists of two large heavy boards, one on top of the other. 4 rods extend upward from 4 corners of the lower board, and they pass through 4 corresponding holes in the corner of the upper board, allowing the upper boards to be lowered into the place of the lower board. The clothing to be pressed are laid out on the lower board, and the upper board is lowered onto them. When the upper board is low enough to press the garments, pegs are inserted into the openings into the rods to keep the upper board in position. So the pegs are used to hold it open. So machbesh abalabatim, we may use a householder's press by removing the holding pegs and raising the upper board if the pressed garments are needed for Shabbos. But we may not press garments on Shabbos in the first place because they will not be ready till after Shabbos. Since the creases in the garments are removed through pressure alone, the boards need to be held in the same place for at least a day. And it's also to make preparations on Shabbos for the weekday. That would be hachana from Shabbos to the Chol. However, regarding a professional launderer, the halacha is that one may not even touch it. One may not touch the press even to open it. The boards of a kaives are pressed together so tightly that separating resembles the malacha of soiser. Rabbi Yehuda argues. Rabbi Yehuda says, "Erev Shabbos, if the launderer's press was partially open before Shabbos, the pegs are in the rods are somewhat loose. You may open it completely by taking out the pegs or remove the garment. Since the press is already partially open, removing the pegs the rest of the way does not resemble demolishing. And the Tanakama, however, holds that one may not remove the pegs while under his press, even if they're already loose, because it might come to remove them in the case where they're tightly inserted, which is going to be usher.